please donate. And if you can't afford it, please donate. No, tell your friends and family about it. This is the second hour of show number 561 too.
583.
580, that's what I said. You always did not listen. You're just not listening, Dave. You're not listening. 583, that's where we are. Now, look, hey. We're going to talk about, it's actually been several shows now, but the Third Reich and the Occult, and there's been an update, so we've recently updated the show notes as well. And there's some research that was done, which we only found last week, a couple of articles which are very interesting. Very interesting. In fact, one is the CWIHP working paper number 91. So we're going to have a look at that. And then there's another one, which was, what was that called? I'll tell you exactly. I can't find it. Anyway, here we go. How Nazi Germany's most diabolical SS officer evaded post-war justice. And this was written January 15, 2022. So it's pretty recent if you think about it, 2022. Right?
So I've got us at page 59.
I want to say that's probably correct.
Witnesses?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly right.
Excellent.
Now, looking at the names, do you want me to start or?
Yes, please.
Okay. A constant, and look, we've been talking about Kamla, the Bell, Russian as well as U.S. Army personnel taking control of scientists and scientific and technical material, things like that. So that's where we are. So Operation Paperclip and all that goes with it. That's the time period just before the end of the war and then, just after the war. A constant criticism of the Bell story is that it is a myth based entirely upon the unverified claims of Polish author Igor Witkowski. In fact, there are others who contribute small portions of the story who are also witnesses to the Bell at Ludwikowice. SS Lieutenant General Jacob Sporenberg, police chief, Gestapo police chief, in Lublin, which was then occupied Poland. SS Hauptsturmführer Rudolf Schuster, from interrogation report at Berlin Document Center about evacuation of the Bell by air in 1945. Dr. Wilhelm Voss, chief executive at Skoda Works, Czechoslovakia, given to Tom Eggleston. Soviet plasma scientist Gian Frolov in 1983 interview referred to Professor Braun Manfred von Arden as first-hand witness. Railway employee from Opole, Joachim Ibrom. Dr. Otto Czerny, whilst working at NASA, recounted Nazi Bell to Greg Rowe. Argentine Economic Ministry report declassified in 1993 refers to Bell being unloaded in Argentina from a multi-engine German aircraft in May 1945.
Wow.
But there's a bit of stuff there. Mm-hmm. Other individuals who may not have had first-hand witness accounts or might not have witnessed it firsthand, the Bell that is, have also contributed to understanding the project surrounding the Bell. Dr. Ronald Richter strove to recreate the Bell project in Argentina after the war and the dismantling of his Bell device under political pressure applied upon Argentina in 1952 grant further insight. It is also worth noting that Arden disclosed to Frolov that whilst Arden had installed one cyclotron-like device in the mine at Ludwikowice, he said there was already another one inside the mine. So at least two. At Bissingen in April 1945, the French captured what appears to have been another incomplete Bell device created by the Swiss scientist Dallenbach. When ALSOS, reached the Austrian town of Melk, they came across another nuclear project with what was termed a transformer room. Dr. Rolf Wiederow, after the war, referred to a device known as an X-ray transformer, which also appears to be the Nazi bell. At least 4 such devices may have existed, including bells at Melk, Bissingen, and Ludwikowice. Furthermore, a giant underground transformer room at Jonstal may have contained yet more Nazi bell machines. The contents of Jonstal remain classified by US authorities. The Nazi bell is intimately connected with the work of Swiss plasma physicist Dallenbach's work with Forschungsstelle D. Dallenbach was contracted by AEG, and his laboratory was located at Bissingen, in Germany, just north of Zurich. Dallenbach scrupulously avoided giving any impression that he was anything other than a neutral during the war. However, he was a fervent Nazi, and several slip-ups by Nazi officials and his own deputy revealed that he was working on an atomic bomb project vital to Germany's war effort. Dallenbach himself maintained his work was pure research, yet during his time in Germany, the Nazis refused to fund any scientific work not vital to the war effort. In fact, as we have learned, Dave, a vast amount of resources, materiel, and personnel went into Project Riese, which for all intents and purposes was, in fact, at least partially related to the Nazi Bell project.
Yeah, and they say that nothing went that was non-vital. No funds went to non-vital work. So what was this then?
100%.
That's right. So Charit and Lager. I'm pronouncing it horribly. Numerous top secret code names are associated with the so-called Nazi Bell. The term Nazi Bell, however, is just a modern affectation due to the device's resemblance to a bell. When the bell arrived in Argentina in May 1945, however, Argentine intelligence referred in a report classified in 1993, calling the device the Bell. By protocol of the Army Weapons Officer Session of 21/7/1942, this project was awarded the priority classification Kriegsentscheidend, decisive for the outcome of the war, hence its priority with the funding. The highest known category of secrecy and funding priority known in the Third Reich. No other known project had it. The electrical giant AEG provided the huge amounts of electrical power under the contract codename Charit Anlage. The codename coexisted with Project Thor. Priority classification was invoked for the Bell with the Gestapo in 1944, quoted as SS 1940. This classification was cited seeking the release of engineer Richard Kremer from a 2-year sentence for defeatist attitude. Is there a missing text there, Mackie?
No, the from shouldn't be there.
Oh, great. And we'll just fix that in post. The name Charit Anlage applied specifically to electrical engineering and manufacture of the bell itself and the supply of power. Another codename associated with Der Laternentrager, the lantern bearer, a loose metaphor for the light bearer. Lucifer presumably refers to medical and biological experiments with radiation. It may also refer to the weaponization of nuclear material produced by the bell itself. Der Lanterntrager research was based on Fürstenstein Castle, according to Gross Rosenkamp survivor Professor Mieczysław Moldavia. According to Professor Moldavia, the other researchers at the castle were also investigating and testing pressure suits for a manned V2 rocket known as A9-A10. A part of a manned two-stage rocket for attacking New York, it was. Rainer Kalsch's book, Hitler Bombe, relates that a team of physicists from Leipzig University at Gießen carried out a lot of research at Ludwigslust, which is where the Nazi bell was located. Sporenberg commented on various animals and personnel dying horrible deaths after exposure to the bell. He said their flesh would liquefy. Gießen is north of Frankfurt am Main, and its research appears focused on genetics and biological research. Was this ghastly research to discover what radiation could do to German enemies? The project was also known as Kronos, or Saturn, which refers to spin polarization plasma physics. Thus, it could easily be inferred that the rings of Saturn represent the plasma torus inside the bell. The bell exploited spin polarization of atoms to create a plasma. It would be entirely fitting to apply Kronos to Gerlach's scientific role. The final, but the most well-known code name was Die Glocke. The meaning behind this code name or its association is entirely unclear. Mackie.
Yeah, look, the only thing that I can say is that it might have looked like a rather large bell. Other than that, there would be anything else. So let's look at the science, though, behind the bell, or at least the science that we suppose it was, because we don't know. We just don't know. No credible, satisfactory explanation of the bell's purpose has ever emerged, and indeed, its very existence is still disputed. Now, that's interesting for a number of reasons, but the most interesting aspect of this is the vast amount of money, as we said before, resources, personnel, etc., that were diverted to this project, specifically as a war-deciding project. And yet, we still don't know. After, 23? After almost 80 years. After almost 80 years, we still don't know. Well, we don't know. Someone knows, right? Now, facts, however, would suggest that the bell used a hitherto barely mentioned alternate method to acquire fissile uranium for atomic weaponry. A photochemistry method mentioned in secretly recorded conversations between Nazi scientists interned at Farm Hall near Cambridge after the war. At Farm Hall after the war, captured Nazi nuclear scientists repeatedly referred to obtaining fissile material from a photochemistry process. Our history books are silent on this method. The author of this article we are sharing with you hypothesized that this device worked in this fashion. Vaporized mercury was spun in a magnetic field to provide excited electrons. Mercury is known to fluoresce easily. Under the influence of an electromagnetic field, electrons would dissociate from their atomic nuclei and would swirl around the machine, much like a donut-shaped plasma toroid. As photons collided with free electrons, those collisions would generate X-rays. The spinning of these electrons, probably in an evacuated low-pressure chamber with just small amounts of mercury vapor, would lead to faster and faster speeds. With each rotation, more and more electrons would be stripped from the mercury, perhaps causing double and triple ionization. Now, a plasma is an electrically induced state of matter beyond those which we are normally used to, like solids, liquids, or gas. We have all seen plasma. It is present in lightning. Now, photochemistry. During the incarceration at Farm Hall, scientists Gerlach, Diebner, and Hartek all referred to the photochemistry method for obtaining fissile uranium. Yet, historical accounts of World War II remain utterly silent on what that process is to which they referred. While the science of photochemistry is understood, the role it played in Nazi science is not mentioned and does remain classified. Dave?
Photochemistry relies upon ionization of an intermediary element to create a plasma, in this case using mercury. X-rays would be generated from the ionized plasma. Sporenberg referred to the use of beryllium oxide inside the Bell centrifuge. Beryllium is also known to donate slow neutrons when bombarded by X-rays. So how is that useful? It's worth noting there are slow neutrons and fast neutrons. Fast neutrons are only useful in fission for the splitting of atoms. What it appears the Nazis were attempting to achieve was fusion, or the adding of neutrons to protons to thorium-232 to transform it into uranium-233. An element is defined by the number of protons in its nucleus. Normally, the number of protons and neutrons are the same, but in an isotope, the number of protons remains the same, but the number of neutrons can vary in a small percentage of atoms. This could be excess or lower numbers of neutrons. For thorium to transmute to uranium requires taking up extra protons. When protons are emitted, that is called beta radiation. Thorium has only one neutrally occurring isotope. Therefore, when converted to uranium, it would be relatively free from impurity. This is another important factor for building atomic weapons, because more than 0.5% contamination renders uranium-233 impossible to use in nuclear weapons. Sporenberg mentioned cerium-525 placed at the central axis of the centrifuge. From his descriptions, we can postulate that cerium-525 was probably paraffin impregnated with beryllium oxide and thorium oxide. Sporenberg mentions red mercury, which is mercury 2 iodide. This would have caused the red or pinkish color which the jelly had. Red mercury, I've never seen that word, scintillates under X-rays and is used as a superconductor. Paraffin works by creating a large cross-section or target by slowing down fast particles. Now, okay, I just want to say this. In all of our work now for fusion, either by using magnetic fields or using lasers to zap material to create a plasma, only this is all in trying to make a fusion power generation. Not to create heavier and heavier elements, especially not to get to uranium-233. The most successful experiment was only beginning of the year, I think, or just the end of last year, where they zapped with like 200 lasers a small pellet, which was surrounded. The pellet was made of diamond, pure and round, and they put 2 units of energy in and got 3 out. But it was for a millionth of a second. Yeah, that's going to take us a while, right? But it was like, you can consider that the same as the Wright brothers flying for 30 meters. Like that's the beginning of doing something where it will just be self-sustaining after that. So we're very close. Was the Nazi bell attempting to do fusion as it's been postulated? I don't know. I don't think so.
And look, and that's exactly what we have to keep in mind here. How quickly we moved from the Wright brothers to the moon, for example, right?
Mm-hmm. 40 years
quickly.
from we just taking off with powered flight to breaking the sound barrier.
So that's in our vernacular, that's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next article that we're going to share with you was published in 2019, also well after we first brought this show to you, and it actually was written by Rainer Kalsch. So Rainer Kalsch was mentioned in the previous article as the author of a book that article relied on. So these are all people. In fact, it was Hitler's bomb that he wrote, Rainer Kalsch. So this is another book that he co-authored together with Frank Durbert, and the article here is a working paper which is called number 91, Hans Kammler, Hitler's Last Hope in American Hands, August 2019. Again, Frank Durbert and Rainer Kalsch. Immediately after the end of World War II, the victorious powers began to interrogate, and sorry, this is net new. The next two articles are net new, and we haven't shared them with you before. Immediately after the end of World War II, the victorious powers began to interrogate the functional elites of the National Socialist state. When the question came to the German V weapons program, that's the rockets, jet fighters, and underground armament factories, the name of Hans Kammler was mentioned again and again. In the final phase of the war, the S-Obergruppenführer and head of the Office of Unit C of the Economic Administration, main office of the SS, had been given far-reaching competencies for the production and use of the latest weapons. The Allies were aware of Kammler, even though they knew far from everything about his underground shadow realm, very D&D. His role in the Holocaust and the mass use of concentration camp inmates in construction projects. So all of these things were unknown to them. They searched intensively for him, but according to the standard narrative, until only a few years ago, came too late. Kammler had allegedly evaded his culpability and committed suicide in Bohemia on May 9, 1945, as we've discussed before. Doubts about this account, however, were never completely silenced, especially since his body was never located and all personal documents remained missing. Gerald Fleming, a leading Holocaust researcher, wanted certainty but could not find sufficient evidence to prove that the suicide narrative was not true. Fleming urged us not to let the story rest, but to continue the research. In the Artikel Ein inszenierter Selbstmord überlebte Hitlers letzter Hoffnungsträger SS-Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler den Krieg. Translates to, a staged suicide. Did Hitler's last hopeful SS-Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler survive the war? It was published in the Zeitschrift für Geschichtswissenschaft in 2014, and that's the newspaper for historical sciences. For the first time, declassified documents and statements were presented, which suggest that Hans Kammler was captured by the Counterintelligence Corps, the CIC, an American military intelligence service. The most important evidence for this thesis was a report by Special Investigator Oscar Packe, dated August 1949. Packe, who worked for the Department of the US military government in Hesse, responsible for denazification, concluded his report as follows. So this is now Packe speaking. The suicide of the subject, suspected and allegedly confirmed by the witnesses, is refuted by the CIC's precise information about his capture and escape in May 1945. Evidence that the subject is now in Soviet custody and is to work in the Soviet occupation zone of Germany could not be provided here. Packe had been informed by the CIC of Kammler's capture and subsequent escape. Was it possible for a high-ranking SS general and his staff to escape from American captivity? Was he really arrested with his staff at the Messerschmitt Works in Oberammergau, as the Packe reports states, by American troops on May 9? And was he able to escape from there with senior SS leaders of his staff? Did the events in fact take place near the underground Messerschmitt plant Bergkristall in Gusen, near Linz? It is likely that Packe did not learn the true circumstances of Kammler's arrest from the Counterintelligence Corps. Recently, Donald W. Richardson, a special agent of the CIC and the Office of Strategic Services, which is now the CIA, has emerged as a key. Shortly before his death, he told his sons that he had brought Hans Kammler to the United States. Shortly before his death, he told his sons that he had brought Hans Kammler to the United States. For reasons of national security, he had to remain silent about it. Despite these sources and Richardson's statement, doubts about the chain of circumstantial evidence persisted. Now, before I hand it to Dave, we've actually had a show on Deathbed Confessions. I don't know if you guys remember that. But people tend to speak the truth when they're about to die. Just want to say that here as a general statement. Over to you, my friend.
However, newly obtained documents prove unequivocally that Hans Kammler was indeed captured by US services. The documents were discovered by two researchers independently of each other. Marek Michalski of Poland, affiliated with the museums of former concentration camps in Treblinka, Stutthof, and Grobrosen, and the Linz-based television journalist Andreas Sulzer of Austria. Kammler's rise. Before we analyze new sources, a few words about Kammler's career. Between 1919 and 1923, Hans Kammler studied architecture at the Technical University of Gdansk and the University of Munich. In 1932, received his PhD. He joined the NSDAP as early as 1931 and became a member of the SS in 1933. He was active until 1937 in the party organization of the NSDAP. Maggie, that stands for?
Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, which means National Socialist Workers, or Germans, Worker Party of Germany. Really. So National Socialists.
And he was partly in a leadership position then. Professionally, he rose rapidly from 1933 on, after serving as the leader of the Reich Federation of Small Gardeners and Settlers, Germany, the Reichsbund der Kleingarder und Kleinsiedler Deutschland, and as a desk officer in various Reich ministries. He was appointed as construction director in the Reich Aviation Ministry in 1940. In 1941, June 1941, he joined the Waffen-SS and was appointed head of the Office 2 Construction in the SS Main Office Administration and Economics. In his position, the Reichsfuhrer SS, Heinrich Himmler, tasked him with the construction of the extermination camps Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Belzec, including the gas chambers and crematoria. The head of the Central Construction Office of the Waffen-SS and police in Auschwitz, Karl Bischoff, kept him abreast of the implementation of the extremely urgent special construction measures and special actions. It's like a project manager, I suspect, right?
Yeah.
Kammler, in effect, bore major responsibility for the genocide of the European Jews. Kammler's responsibilities soon grew in August 1943, Himmler put him in charge of overseeing the development of the underground production facilities for the A4 program, long-range missile, also called the V2. They were using T-Stoff and X-Stoff as the fuels. In March 1944, he was commissioned to direct the underground construction work undertaken by the SS to secure the production of fighter aircraft. Underground, that's just amazing. In August of 1944, he became Himmler's special representative for achieving the operational capabilities of the A4 Meki.
Only a month later, he was given the oversight of the long-range missile squadron rocket attack against London and Paris. Starting on January 31st, 1945, Kammler had responsibility for the development of aircraft bombs and long-range missiles. The rapid advance of the Allied armies forced the demolition of the V weapon program at the end of March of 1945, but this did not end Kammler's rise. His simultaneous promotion to SS Obergruppenführer took place on March 27, 1945, followed by his appointment as plenipotentiary of the Führer for the jet aircraft. He was thus the head of the development and production of jet aircraft, Me-262. The last months of the war saw his gaining ever greater responsibilities. On April 3, 1945, Kammler conferred for the last time with Hitler. Reich Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels was impressed by Kammler and noted in his diary the following: "The Führer has had very long negotiations with Obergruppenführer Kammler, who now bears much of the responsibility for the reform of the Luftwaffe on his shoulders. Kammler is doing well, and great hopes rest on him." End quote. Whether Kammler actually believed that he could contribute to a turnaround in the production of the Me-262 jet aircraft project or other miracle weapons is an open question. In any case, he traveled to the main production sites for the Me-262, put pressure on the directors of the armament factories, and tried to relocate machinery, components, and personnel from the areas threatened by the Allied advance to other regions. Wernher von Braun and Walter Dornberger remained silent about this after the war. After their move from Peenemünde to the Harz Mountains, the rocket engineers not only had to deal with the V2, but also with the Typhoon missile planned to weaponize the Me-262. Only staff engineer Rudolf Bree, head of the E9 development department of the Technical Air Armament, revealed in 1947 to British interrogators the structures formed with a Kammler working staff. The activities of this staff were aimed at the development of acoustic triggers for the Typhoon missiles expected to have an extraordinary impact. Yet, with the rapid advance of the US Third Army under General Patton, this work was threatened, even in the Harz Mountains. Consequently, Kammler used the train dubbed the Typhoon Express to relocate specialists, prisoners, and equipment to the Alpine Fortress. Production of the Typhoon missiles, however, did not resume. Even the mass production of the Me-262 did not go beyond early stages. On April 21, 1945, Kammler reported to Reich Marshal Göring about the current difficulties with the jet hunters. And this is a quote from his report. Subject: Organization of Strahl fighters, which is jet fighters. Our attitude is as follows. A, it is impossible for the jet units to remain in the Prague area for reasons of fuel supply. According to reports received from Hessig, which is the 9th Flieger Corps, fuel for about one operation is now available. According to report of OKL Air Staff 4, Chief QM4, Department 4 rather, there is no possibility for guaranteeing timely supply in rail transport. Provisioning with tank lorry columns can no longer be carried out. Small stocks now available must therefore be employed. 2. Or B. I request that a decision of the Führer be obtained so as to avoid letting the jet units, which are at present strongly concentrated in the Prague area, be smashed up before they can be put into action. Ground organization in South Germany, including supply and servicing, is ready to take over the task. Dave?
Operation Little Foxley 2. In the final phase of the war, the Allies realised with greater accuracy the central role that Kammler played in the complex structure of the Reich's industrial military complex. A dangerous adversary in the face of bomb and rocket attacks, especially for Great Britain, had to be eliminated. In February of 1945, Kammler was therefore included on list of 10 high-ranking SS leaders targeted for assassination by the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, as part of the secret operation Little Foxley. Aside from Kammler, the targets included in the documented order Walter Schellenberg, Heinrich Müller, Otto Ollendorf, Gottlob Berger, Hans Juttner, Oswald Paul, Richard Glucks, Hermann Fiegerlein, and Alfred Wannenberg. These men were considered to be particularly dangerous and easier to eliminate than Hitler, Himmler, or Goebbels. SOE began to collect details of their daily routines and photographs of their routines of them. In addition to other sources, radio messages from the Wehrmacht, the SS, the police and concentration camp administrations were decrypted by the interception specialists in Bletchley Park in large numbers and with increasing speed were also used. Allied intelligence agencies were hence able to create and constantly update the profile of Kammler's movements. I think my voice is breaking. Kammler, however, did not make it easy for any British Special Command because he never spent a long time in one place. He radioed on April the 16th, 1945 from Munich. Wow, there's a name you can pronounce that one.
Let me see, where are we?
Muspillistrasse.
Muspillistrasse.
19. The seat of the SS Construction Inspection Reich South, to Himmler's adjunct Werner Grothmann, to Göring's chief adjunct Colonel von Brauchitsch, as well as Speer, can be reached via Munich 480043. Meldekopf, Berlin, under old address. I am myself constantly on move. At the beginning of April 1945, however, there seemed to be an opportunity to eliminate him. At the end of March, the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force had ordered the Bomber Command of the Royal Air Force to attack Nordhausen. The pilots were told the goal of their mission, purpose of attack, to kill high-ranking and other Nazi officials evacuated from Berlin to these areas. The reference to the high-ranking Nazi officials was to motivate the bomber pilots and counteract moral scruples. The major moral scruples. They were doing carpet bombing back then. Who cares, right? Woo! Carpet bombing. The major attacks took place on April 3rd and 4th, just a week before US troops reached Nordhausen, destroying large parts of the city and claiming more than 8,800 lives. Shortly after the attacks, Kammler drove through the burning city. Half a year earlier, in mid-September 1944, Kammler and his staff had barely escaped capture by Allied forces. As part of their of the Air Operation Market Garden. What a lovely name. Paratroopers had almost circled his temporary headquarters in Berg en Dal in the Netherlands. Kamler wrote later, during the entire mission, we had actually had incredible luck. On Sunday, the Anglo-Americans almost caught me and then almost raised my staff in the command post. Wow. That's so many times Mekki was lucky.
Oh, look, yeah, but what we see here is, though, because some of the articles we've read before and some of the research stated that there was no interest in Kamler at all, right, after the war, and that was because he was just a bureaucrat. Now, here it is clear that even during the war, just before the end of the war, they were looking to assassinate him, right? He was one of 9 people they tried to assassinate, which is in direct contradiction to any of the statements made before that he was of no interest because he was a bureaucrat. So this is new information. Which leads us into the next section of evacuations and the hiding of research papers. On the afternoon of April 1, Kamler ordered the evacuation of about 500 rocket engineers, earlier transferred from Peenemünde to the Nordhausen area, to the Bavarian Alps. Historian Michael J. Neufeld suspects that Kamler wanted to use the rocket experts as a bargaining chip for ceasefire negotiations. In fact, it is conceivable that the transfer of V weapons technology, documents, and key personnel to the American military had already been set in motion as early as the end of 1944. During his internment in the United Kingdom, Walter Dornberger reported to fellow generals on contacts that had crossed the embassy in Lisbon. Brown and Dornberger himself had realized at the end of December 1944 that things were going wrong and had consequently been in touch since that time with General Electric Company through the German embassy in Portugal, with the view to coming to some arrangement. Okay, this is General Electric, so we just clear your G, right? That's who they were talking to. To what extent Kamler was privy to this plan, if there were any secret contacts, remains uncertain. Speer later claimed that Kamler had suggested during their last conversation in April 1945 that he had intended to offer business to the Americans. No documents that prove this point have become available so far. In any case, there was little Kamler could do in his new function as Führer representative for jet aircraft. In retrospect, Armaments Minister Albert Speer described the measures Kamler had taken as amateurish. For his part, Kamler set off in the direction of Bavaria and finally reached Oberammergau on April 22, 1945, where he caught up with a group of rocket engineers around Werner von Braun and Walter Dornberger. Kamler first stayed in the hotel of Alois Lang, which he had commandeered as early as February 9, 1945, for an indefinite period. But shortly thereafter moved to the idyllic Linderhof Castle. Since 1943, it had housed a development group of the Messerschmitt Company's Upper Bavarian Research Institute Oberammergau, which worked on the development of anti-aircraft missiles. The stay in Oberammergau probably focused on the duplication and backup of research documents. Von Braun himself had the foresight to hide the most important documents about rocket science in an abandoned mine between Goslar and Nordhausen. In addition, Dornberger had a hiding place for microfilm, packaged in a cigarette case, near Oberjoch. Despite entering into services for the Americans, von Braun did not reveal the whole truth about the level of development of the guided missiles. Now that's the guy that became the father of the Apollo program. Right? Mm-hmm. Infuriated, the CIC stated, although by this time von Braun may regret his failure to substantiate his often repeated statement that he had planned long before the end of the war to turn all his work over to the United States. He may still be camouflaging his full knowledge of the fact of the missing documents and may therefore have sent a fake location sketch for the tin box at Oberjoch to Dornberger. The reporting officer therefore suggested keeping von Braun away from the other rocket specialists, as well as his family, until he revealed all his knowledge of the missing documents. But nothing came of it. Let us return to the events of April 1945. A coordinated approach between Kammler and the rocket engineers did not happen. Mutual mistrust and differences were simply too large. While the von Braun group was waiting for the war to end, to offer their knowledge to the Americans, Kammler rejected a joint capitulation. Von Braun later claimed that he had heard in a conversation with Kammler and his adjutant SS Sturmbannführer Arthur Struck that both wanted to hide in the monastery Ettal near Garmisch-Partenkirchen. Senior staff engineer Rudolf Brey, who worked for US naval intelligence until 1946 after the war, apparently had also heard about such a plan. He gave British interrogators in February 1947 two stories about Kammler's whereabouts. According to one, he had disguised himself as an agricultural laborer and lives in Upper Bavaria. According to another, he tried to become a monk in Ettal Monastery near Oberammergau. His interrogators commented that Bray might know more than he revealed. He was about to give us the address of Kammler's wife, and he suddenly seemed to change his mind and declared that he could not remember.
Enigmatic final rides. In fact, Kammler did not hide but moved with his staff on April 28, 1945 to Ebensee. The focal point was the Villa Mendelsholm, which had been seized by the construction management of SS Special Inspection 4 in the fall of 1943. The villa was the former summer residence of the widely ramified Mendelssohn Bartholdy family. On the night of the 3rd to 4th of May 1945, Kammler then gave the order to depart for Prague. His subordinates were reportedly appalled, given that this would amount to a suicide mission. Shortly before departure, Kammler handed over a letter for his wife Jutta to Arthur Strack, who was not supposed to accompany him. The letter did not testify to an unconditional adherence to the rule of the law until its demise, but rather to its will to survive. I do not think, it's a quote, of putting a stop to all the people entrusted to me by sneaking out my wife in a cowardly way, end quote. To what extent these lines signalled an escape plan to which only his wife Jutta was privy remains an open question. In any case, the reports of Kammler's subordinates agree to the extent that Kammler gave the departure order around 4 a.m. Kammler's second driver, Kurt Pruk, recorded the route in a map and marked important stations. Accordingly, the column initially drove towards Linz. Interestingly, the route marked in the map ends near Friedstadt, not far from Linz. On the way to Prague, as reported by Kammler's housekeeper Gertrude Timm, who had also fled from Berlin to Ebensee and joined the convoy, they had lost sight of each other. Karl Otto Sohr, Secretary of State of the Reich Ministry of Armaments and War Production, also mentioned Linz as interim station of the Kammler staff on the way to Prague during the interrogation. Yet another testimony indicates that Kammler separated from the rest of the group. Frieda Willer, a neighbour of the Kammlers in Berlin-Grunwald, reported on a conversation that she had in 1947 with the daughter of Kammler's first driver, Friedrich Bohm. Bohm's daughter said, that her father was wounded while fleeing to Bavaria and died as a result of his injury. This statement corresponds to the autopsy report by Friedman Baum. According to the report, Baum was wounded on the 4th of May and died of blood poisoning on May 29th, 1945, in the Spa and Park Hotel, Cumberland, in Gemund. Gemunden, there we go, which was converted into a hospital. If Friedrich Baum chauffeured his supervisor Kammler and they were separated from the rest of the group, they cannot have gone far beyond Linz. Everything that was later reported in testimony under oath by Kammler's subordinates, SS Obersturmbannführer Heinz Züner and SS Oberscharführer Kurt Pruck, or as well testimonies of other contemporary witnesses about the events of May 4 to 9 in 1945 and about Kammler's alleged suicide, is questionable. They are fictitious narratives that contradict each other in decisive details. They only served the purpose of obscuring the actual events and supporting the pension claims of Judah Kammler, for which her husband had to be officially declared deceased. Kammler's office manager, Heinz Schurman, who had remained in Ebensee at his boss's orders, reported on a last conversation in which Kammler had made it known that he would not allow any documents to get into the hands of the Americans. In Schurman's view, Kammler had wanted to join the Russians. 3 minutes left.
Interesting. Look, I don't think we'll get through the next bit, but look, this is really interesting because, like I said, this is information that we weren't able to share with you before because it didn't exist, very simply. But we can see here that the narrative around Kammler's either death or suicide, either way, violent death, seems to be unraveling. It seems to be unraveling. What exactly happened, I don't think we still know, even once we're finished with the texts we're going to share with you. Suffice it to say, though, that the bell, or whatever it was, and whatever they tried to do with it, made its way out of Germany and at least into Argentina.
Yes.
At the very least, that far. Now, why Argentina? Well, as we've said before, Argentina being settled by Italians was pro-German, and a lot of Nazis actually fled to South America and specifically to Argentina after the war. Having said that, and this is just me talking now, Dave, feel free to get your mustard. I don't think it stayed in Argentina. I know this is going to sound crazy, but this is the shiny side out, so I can say whatever I like. I believe that the bell was then transported from Argentina into the Antarctic and their existing German base, where I think work continued, which was known, I think, or highly suspected by the Allies.
Yep.
And which led to the
high jump,
very fast, very fast organized and completely out of proportion for an expeditionary force or research force of, like Dave said, Operation High Jump. In order to, and I believe really, in order to either neutralize or claim or somehow obtain the Bell technology, because it was too dangerous to be continued with. That's my opinion. Look,
just think
the timelines and the activities line up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. And just think that the two carrier groups, that's a lot. Admiral Byrd was there. Right? Yeah, it's extraordinary. We did a whole show on Operation High Jump.
But if you line it all up, even if Kammler had been killed, I don't think he was, but even he had been killed, the Bell made it out, and then the Bell, in my opinion, because Argentina, it's a skip, hop, and a jump into the Antarctic from there, right?
It sure is. And that takes us all the way to the end of the show. Thank you very much for listening, and catch us Tuesday and Thursday morning, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, US, for Plato's Cave, and we'll see you again next weekend for another Shiny Side Out. In the meantime, Jet Bear's got a great show. Stay tuned.